All right, here we go. Making it in retail podcast,
Episode 2.
episode 2. We have the pilot. This is the second actual episode with an actual guest. Our first guest, virtual, Tyler Barrick, Vice President of Grocery at ECRM, RangeMe's parent company. That's how I see it written everywhere, so I want to make sure I get it in. So we're super excited. This is Alejandro right here. I'm Nabel. We're filming from Paramount, California. Tyler's in Tampa Bay, and we're going to kick it off. Tyler, thank you for being here.
Of
Appreciate it.
course. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
For sure. So we'll kick it off. Well, Tyler, if you want to just go ahead and give a quick introduction, who you are, where you're from, whatever you want to share with the people, let them know because there'll be some type of connection between you and somebody somehow.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. So, Ohio, born and raised, Akron, Cleveland area. Growing up as a Kent State grad, 2009. Been with ECRM for 15 years to celebrate my 15-year anniversary. So, been a great ride. I relocated, or I moved to Tampa, Florida, about 12 years ago. Met my wife here in Tampa. Got three beautiful kids now, two girls, 8 and 9. My son's 5, and work remote, travel, maybe 5, 6 times a year. But love ECRM and excited to share more about, what I'm doing and how we help the industry.
Awesome.
Mhm.
3 kids.
Probably before we keep going, what does ECRM stand for?
It stands for Efficient Collaborative Retail Marketing. So funny you ask is, if you ask 100 people that have been to ECRM, maybe 5 could tell you what that acronym stands for. So we got a ton of acronyms, but yeah, that's just really what we're known by. Quite frankly, it doesn't even do ECRM justice because we extend beyond retail today, right? So food service and other channels, but that's the acronym that sticks. I don't see us changing it.
No, that one's interesting because I've been to ECRM as a retailer buyer, and our company goes to ECRM now as a supplier and a brand. And even last night, we was like, I don't know what it stands for, electronic customer relationship management, and I'm like, that just doesn't vibe. So that's okay. That's a perfect clarity.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some other stuff you guys do too, but for listeners new to ECRM, can you give a quick elevator pitch for what problems ECRM solves for retailers and suppliers? And we'll dig deeper too, but like a quick pitch.
Sure. Essentially, ECRM, we're a business process solutions company connecting buyers and sellers. Have been doing so for over 30 years. So we have a couple services. You mentioned at the intro, ECRM being the parent company of RangeMe, which is accurate. ECRM acquired RangeMe in 2017. So I keep it simple in 2 buckets. We have RangeMe, which is our self-service solution, online platform that we tout as the largest online product discovery platform in the world. So it would certainly dive into that. Essentially, it's a brand's digital sell sheet that they can use throughout the year to get connected with buyers and get brand exposure. On the ECRM side, which is my forte, we have a white glove service solution where we actually set up and curate one-on-one meetings between buyers and sellers. So a lot different than your traditional trade show and expo, a much different vibe, much more relaxed. You can come in prepared as a supplier, knowing exactly who you're meeting with and when. So bottom line, our tools are helping suppliers save countless time and money connecting with buyers. And I could answer that the other way from the buyer side, right? Like, what value are we providing buyers? We partner with most of the top retailers and distributors from across North America. We help them with product sourcing, product discovery, category planning. So we have a pretty wide breadth of services and how we work and partner with, again, various buyers depending on channel.
It's a lot. That's a lot. I'm thinking what stuck with me was product discovery platform. So that's big if you're trying to get your product discovered. And then those meetings, what to make clear for people when you're a supplier or retailer and you're going to ECRM, you have a tight schedule. So you know beforehand, I'm going to meet the buyer from this company, this company, this company. And me having been there, like it's strict. Like Tyler's whole team is there making sure everything's on schedule. Nobody's missing any meetings. If one of your meetings isn't there, they're going to go find them and bring them and vice versa. So um, super organized. And yeah, it's a big, huge help. So, and I've personally
Exactly.
seen brands, small and some of the most popular ones participating in ECRMs. Can you, if we dive a little deeper, I know you're on grocery, but can you outline maybe some different channels and different categories that you guys cover?
Absolutely. So from the food and beverage side, we cover every food and beverage category across channels. And as I mentioned earlier, outside of retail grocery, we have connections with food service from hotels to restaurant groups, colleges, universities, cruise lines, airlines. So it's a pretty vast, network and of categories. And then outside of food and beverage, we have a general merchandise team. Actually started on the general merchandise team 15 years ago as an account manager. So I could certainly speak to that. And then other categories, health and beauty care is a big one, and also pharmaceuticals. So literally, we cover it all. If you have automobiles, we don't cover that, right? But pretty much everything CPG we cover.
What's CPG actually?
Consumer packaged goods.
Consumer packaged goods. Okay, I see.
So the shows are set up by category then, not by retail channel.
So most are set up by category. There are some that are more attribute driven and some that are channel driven. So an example of channel driven, we have a convenience specific session. So obviously all convenience stores, convenience distributors. Some of the other channel ones, we have one for campus food service, so all colleges and universities, food service at retail. I'm trying to think of some others. So some other attribute-driven ones we do on the food side: natural, organic, plant-based foods, gluten-free, keto. We have one that's kind of unique in that it's for diversity, minority-owned food and beverage suppliers. We do that one across channels. So we have an HBC one, a general merchandise one. So it varies. Like literally, we have something for everyone. You mentioned earlier, it made a really good point. We have something for, if you're a leading brand, we have something for you. If you're an emerging brand, we have something for you. If you're somewhere in the middle, we have something for you. So it's not often that I talk to someone that we don't have a service that can serve them.
Okay, and I'm assuming that like the services that you offer them are all kind of like unique. So obviously, like what you get from groceries is going to be unique from pharmaceutical and stuff like that.
Very much. Yeah, everything's catered specific to, whether you're a buyer or seller for that matter. We customize your schedule to fit your focus and objectives. So I like to say it's not a one size fits all solution. It's really custom, and that's where the white glove service end comes into it, right? I always make the comparison to trade shows. It's so much unlike the traditional trade show and expo. I say where you sign up and show up. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. But what I mean is our service model, we walk you through from point A to point Z. And even after it's all said and done, give you some great tools for follow up.
There you go. Point A to point Z, man. That sounds like they offer a lot.
The
Yes.
hotel and cruise line, that like totally caught me off guard, but I'm like, I know we're in there with Nybrew. I'm like, all right, we gotta explore more of that avenue.
Interesting.
You mentioned like a ton of services that are offered. What do you think is the most used or like loved service or tool? And then is there anything that might be new or you think it's super underrated and like people need it, people should take more advantage of it?
I could answer that in a few ways. I think one of the services, first and foremost, again, our service model facilitates every aspect. It starts with preparation, and I think that's really key is when a supplier or buyer signs up for ECRM, you have a dedicated client success manager. So again, from walking through, here's where you complete your company profile, your capabilities, understanding your focus and objectives, tailoring that schedule, working closely with them to make sure that it's a good use of their time and investment. So utilizing the client success manager, I think, is one of the biggest tools that we have. And sometimes it's underutilized. So I think that's kind of the second part of that question is you get some suppliers take full advantage of the services and others won't as much as they probably should. I think that happens probably with more so first time attendees where they don't realize everything that's going into the service until they get there. And then they think, well, next time I should do this and this and this, and maybe I didn't utilize all the tools I had at my disposal because it's a lot. I mean, when we promote ECRM, it's hard to list out every single thing that's included because again, there is a lot to it, and yeah, I like to say we do everything shy of selling your products if you're a supplier, right? Like we're not only representing your brand, we're not in your meeting selling your products, but if we can do it, we will to help you get the value and make the connections you're looking for.
Nice. And then I see even an addition to all that is you, Joe, and some of the other team at ECRM, just when you guys are sharing your own opinions on social media of different products you saw or different stuff that you guys thought were cool. So that's an even additional
Yeah.
added.
So out of curiosity, I mean, because like RangeMe seems to be like your online tool. I mean, was that your like online tool that you guys acquired, or did ECRM already have like online tools available?
ECRM is a web-based platform, right? So it's always been an online, like everything's driven online, right? You have that human element of the business and then you have the online, but we didn't have a vast platform that was, for lack of a better term, like a marketplace where you have this collection of brands that's available to the vast universe.
Hmm.
So that was really where the RangeMe, tie-in came from, and what was so appealing with the acquisition, because it allowed ECRM to be able to say, not only can we connect you in person or virtually, that ability came about during the pandemic, but now we can connect you throughout the year. We can be your sole platform if you so choose to be able to connect with buyers virtually, in person, and digitally throughout the year.
Cool.
Okay. So ECRM owns RangeMe, and you kind of just talked about it, which is one of the next questions you led into. So I'm going to skip to it. How do the platforms complement each other? And if there was a new brand that was brand new to both, what do you recommend that they start with, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, so they definitely complement each other, and I'm always very quick to point out, one's not a replacement for the other, right? Because I'll talk to some brands that are on RangeMe, and they might say, well, I'm already on RangeMe, right? But that's not a reason to not be at ECRM. And so an example could be, on RangeMe, it's a very vast network, right? Everyone from independents to your largest retailers are on RangeMe. I mean, there's literally tens of thousands of buyers. And on the ECRM side, we tend to focus more on your larger chain accounts. So from the retail perspective, right, we're talking Kroger, HEB, Albertsons, Giant Eagle, Walmart, Target, your large accounts, and then your large regional national distributors from the retail perspective. So you're not going to come to an ECRM session and find independence. They have a tremendous value, but that model wouldn't work bringing them in to have select meetings, right? For a number of reasons. But on the RangeMe side, you can be getting connected with some of those smaller retailers, right? So, you can be meeting with accounts and getting connected with accounts on RangeMe that will never be at ECRM. And for that matter, you might come to ECRM and get connected with accounts that aren't on RangeMe, or maybe they're not as active on RangeMe. So, the two services really, both serve that purpose of brand exposure and connecting with buyers. And that's where, again, RangeMe, someone can utilize throughout the year, anytime, day or night, versus ECRM. It's really something you plan for, you gear up for. It could be an annual thing, it could be a biannual thing. I have some brands that take part in 12 ECRM sessions a year. So it's really, you know, however it fits into your strategy.
So basically, you're just trying to prepare them, like in the sense, like don't get too overwhelmed and stuff like that. Like RangeMe is a good, easy way if you're new to it. ECRM is like, okay, we got some experience, but we still need some professionalism.
That's a good way to look at it. A lot of times, RangeMe is the lead in to ECRM. Most of the suppliers I talk to on a daily, weekly basis, surprisingly, most will find RangeMe first and then they'll say, what's ECRM? And I say surprisingly because probably just because I've been with the company as long as I have, and ECRM is this legacy brand that's been around 30 years. So it's pretty surprising to me when I come across suppliers that they might be going to the big industry trade shows, but they've never heard of ECRM. And I think that's what I love, that why I love this business so much is because I get to tell that story, right? Because a lot of times from a emerging brand perspective, you'll see these guys at several industry trade shows and they were told by someone in the industry, if you want to connect with buyers, you need to be at this trade show, that trade show. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, we have a solution that I certainly feel confident in that is a fraction of the price of those trade shows and could save them an enormous amount of time and money, and actually having quality conversations with people, no distractions, and just all the benefits that come along with the service.
Yeah, we were just at, what's the last show where Nibru was in Chicago?
Yeah, we had several that week. The two specifically for Nibru were private label, food and beverage, and food service.
Okay. Yeah, and I know Ed and Akash that showed up there, like when they left, they were like, it was amazing. And like you mentioned, like the quality of the people they were talking to, plus the quality time that they got to spend, whether it been 10 minutes, but it was like, yeah, at a trade show, you might get lucky, but you're looking around and trying to chase people down or, hoping for the right person walks by at the right time. So there's all those different
Mhm.
things.
Exactly.
So the range me is kind of like you have having your own website, except it's within range me's portal that already has the right traffic that you're looking for coming. So that's what kind of makes me think of it. Like you might have a website and there's no traffic to it. You
Yeah.
drop it in range me, there's buyers and people looking for product. And so you have a higher chance of them seeing it. And then to reinforce that, you definitely should be getting out in the marketplace at the ECRMs to continue building on all that. So yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, like Tyler said, ECRMs are the trade shows, the meetings in person, and those are specific times throughout the year. And RangeMe gives you presence 365 days a year. So, what goes on behind the scenes of ECRM, like during the matchmaking process, like when the ECRM is matching specific brands with the specific buyers to create those meetings?
A lot, of course, goes on behind the scenes. Of course, we have our digital tools, our internal platform and processes, right, from scheduling. But it's really that human element. I go back to that once again, right? Because some people I talk to in the industry, even those that have been to ECRM, they tend to think, there's this. It's like an AI, right? It's like an AI tool that's matchmaking everybody together, or even from the scheduling standpoint, it's a scheduling application that's putting everything together. And that's actually not the case, right? I'm sure there's probably some AI applications that we could implement here and there, but it's the people behind the business, right? And I think that's what makes us unique is because everyone shares that same passion. So from the scheduling example, we actually have a team of schedulers, and so their job is literally assigning the meeting times and slots. And a lot goes into that. So, for example, let's say you take at any given session, let's say, there could be anywhere from 50 to 100 buying groups, and then you have individual buyers from all those accounts. From the supply side, again, on average, maybe 50 to 100 suppliers, depending on the session. So you think all about all the categories, all the capabilities, and making sure that everyone's meeting with the right people. That's a tremendous task. So first and foremost, it's qualifying both sides to make sure that a meeting makes sense. We don't want to waste anyone's time, right? So everything's really driven based on categories, based on capabilities, also, focus and objectives from both sides. So there is a lot that goes into that. So that stems in large part. We have a retail team that is working with every single account closely to understand those buyers' focus, objectives, requirements to do business. So they're not just a name on a list, right? Because a lot of the times that's what they are at a trade show, right? You see Mr. Whole Foods walking down the aisle, and it's like you don't have a clue what category they purchase for, what their objectives are. All you do is you see the name badge, right? And so with our format, it's much more in depth. It's a relationship driven business. And I go back to again that white glove service where we work intimately with every buyer, every seller to curate that schedule. So our client success team is instrumental with that. And that's what they do on a day in and day out basis is working with the buyers, working with the sellers to get them prepared. And again, our scheduling team do an amazing job coordinating all these appointments. Because the other key element you have to consider, and by the way, these sessions take place in a hotel. I don't think we mentioned that, not in a big convention hall. So you think about the flow of the meetings, right? That's critical because if you have a buyer that's in a meet on the 15th floor in one of the meeting rooms, and then their next meeting is down in the innovation pipeline or the discovery hub in one of the ballrooms, typically on the meeting or lobby level, you know, you want to put a break in there so they have time to get to that next appointment. So there's a tremendous amount of thoughtfulness and logistics that go into coordinating these schedules, and of course availability, making sure that, okay, this buyer's going to be there on this day, they're leaving on this day because not everyone has the same parameters. So a tremendous amount of human element complements the technology.
So it's the qualifying process is very interesting. That's basically the whole pre-approval, like making sure like this the brand or the supplier they have their wish list of exactly what they want and looking for, and the retailers also have their wish list. So it's you guys matching that up to make sure there's the highest amount of potential for these meetings. So
Exactly, because sometimes that wish list may not translate into meetings, right? I mean, you may come in saying, I want to meet with, from a supply side, I want to meet with X, Y, and Z. They're big on my target list, but it may turn out, that's not your category buyer. Or maybe there's only someone from the private label team there. You don't have a private label capability, so that's where, again, just working closely to identify, you know, make sure they're speaking to the right people on either side, and that's going to be a good use of time. So it's time consuming, and on average, it can take at least several weeks. I like to say we need at least 12 weeks to put together a great schedule, deliver a great experience. We can do it on a condensed time frame, but it cheapens the value a little bit from a preparation standpoint. Again, especially if it's a first time attendee. So we do need a significant amount of time to be able to deliver the best experience.
12 weeks seems fast as it is already. Like that's amazing. Like remarkable to be able to put an event like that together in 12 weeks.
I mean, that's so interesting because I mean, like, you have the experience in it, and, like, that I don't have it. So that's why when I hear 12 weeks, I'm like, I could understand how that sounds kind of like a lot. As like you mentioned, like if you're a first time person, that may seem like a lot, but you got to go through that process because you explain it in a good way where you go like the human element versus AI. Like if it was AI, it has to totally rely on what my experience is, and I might not have any knowledge. Where you adding in that human element, you said 30 plus years, right, of experience being in this market. That is just kind of like you have knowledge that you might ask me the right questions that I didn't even know to ask.
Yeah, it's complex. I mean, we try to simplify it as much as we can and make it turnkey, but there's a lot of elements there to consider.
I've had experience that the more you try so hard to simplify things, the more you make it complicated.
True, that's a good point.
So you'd mentioned just in the last thing, talking about capabilities, like what some buyers might be looking for, requirements they need from a supplier to work with them, capabilities, well, like you mentioned, private label, that's to do with distribution capabilities, accounting things. Can they invoice? Can they bill? Can they ship? Because everybody wants to work with the big retailers, but if you actually got the order, can you make that happen? That's a big part of it. You see a bunch of emergent brands, you know, are there any traits that you see that are like from the brands that are retail ready versus brands that aren't, but they might think they are or want to be, but they're not retail ready? Is there any characteristics between the two that what would make you retail ready?
There's quite a few ways, of course, I could answer that, but I think the basic elements that go into being retail ready, and I guess even that question alone, right? Like, are you retail ready? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because be retail ready to roll out with Whole Foods versus Walmart versus Sam's Club versus Bristol Farms versus, if we're talking e-commerce, I mean, that can mean a lot of different things. I think some of the essential formula there is you have the right packaging, you have UPC codes, you have insurance, and some of those actually tie into a RangeMe checklist. I don't want to derail us going too heavily into RangeMe and getting too deep on that, but on RangeMe, there is an element that we actually qualify for brands to make sure they're retail ready. It's called RangeMe Verified. So if you have a RangeMe premium account, there's actually a checklist of about 10 criteria and questions to make sure a brand is retail ready and set up to do business. Those are a few of the elements. I think some other things that aren't always a checklist would be, pricing, right? I mean, you have to be able to discuss pricing. And if you're using a distributor, if you're going direct, there's a lot of elements there in itself. Make sure you have the right margins. And like you mentioned a little bit, I mean, some certifications, depending on the retailer, they may be looking for certain safety certifications, SQF, GFSI. There could be certain clean label requirements. If you're talking to Whole Foods, right? They have a very long list of banned ingredients. having enough quantity to be able to supply that retailer, depending on how many stores you're talking about. So if you're manufacturing stuff in your home kitchen and you're getting ready to sit down and talk to a major retailer, you're probably not ready. You might be ready for a conversation to get some knowledge from them and find out what it takes, but are you ready to deliver? Absolutely not. So if you're not self-manufacturing, certainly having a co-packer in place, I think that's probably a key element.
So it sounds like retail ready is just knowing how to scale and stuff like that.
Essentially, I think understanding the basic elements of what it's going to take to fulfill those purchase orders and understanding too what the buyer objectives are. And that's just a small piece of it, right? I mean, we could probably spend another hour talking about what does it take to be successful in retail, because we know that getting your product on the shelf and getting the green light, that's a win. But then you have to prove that by getting the product off the shelf, right? You have to prove that there's a consumer demand there.
That's a good point. Didn't really think about that.
What does it take to be successful in retail? That's a good podcast name. I mentioned the retail ready because when we had Supreme Beef Jerky here, they were on RangeMe, and he had mentioned he was sharing some tips that he's like, when we first got on, our packaging didn't look like this. It was literally a blank bag with like a sticker label. And then he's like, so we got our packaging right, so it looked good. We had to get our distribution set up. So like those are a few minimums. Make sure your product looks great, and then distribution set up. And I mean, if we go super basic, which probably needs to be said sometimes, like you mentioned, like you have to have a UPC, like that's super, but hey, so with that RangeMe verified, so does that show up different? If you're a retailer, you're in RangeMe, can you filter? Now I'm thinking you'll be able to filter to RangeMe verified products, so you already know they can serve.
Kind of like how we mentioned earlier, where if you choose groceries or pharmaceutical, they tailor you different ways.
hmm and yes, you bring up a good point there, where that is actually a key element, and by design, because with the vast network of suppliers, the number I put out there is over 250,000 brands. I've been using that number for a long time, so I'm sure it's a lot more today. But how do you stand out in a sea of 250,000 plus suppliers, where you can pretty much say with confidence there's not a supplier there that has something so unique that there's no one else in the category? Well, maybe, but for the most part, if you have a jerky or a hot sauce or whatever ready to drink beverages, there's other brands out there. I'm sure there's elements that set them apart, but my point is, you're not the only one that's going to hit back on a search. So that is a tool that buyers use, is by RangeMe verified brands. Because if I'm a buyer, I want to be able to quickly see, okay, which ones meet these basic criteria that understand the retail process, right? Because to your point about packaging, and that packaging looks great. I love the new packaging there that he had on the jerky. But if it doesn't meet the basic elements, it's kind of like a waste of their time. So they can filter specifically by RangeMe verified brands, and by default, one of the benefits of the premium tier is they get about 7 times more buyer views than someone that's not RangeMe verified. So there is a big benefit just to understanding what that basic checklist looks like and be able to get that verification tag.
Nice. 7X is big.
Yeah, I mean, like the way it sounds like to me after hearing your conversation, it just almost sounds kind of like a lot of people need to understand, like, yeah, you may be unique, but it's like if you're not even within the crowd of, like, let's say beef jerky and stuff like that, like if you're not even blending in with the crowd of their other beef jerkies, it's like there's no point in standing out unique. You got to be able to fit in with them in order to stand out.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay.
So RangeMe verified, would that be by product or is that by supplier? Like, would InMotion Design be RangeMe verified, or would Nibrew be RangeMe verified?
It depends. You can set up an account on RangeMe under company level, right? So in motion, and you could have all the items listed under there. Or if you have multiple brands, you could do it on a brand level. So you got a couple options in terms of how you want to set up your brand profile and how you want to go through the verification process.
Needless to say, whoever's watching, your product's on RangeMe, make sure you're RangeMe verified, or you go through the steps to get yourself RangeMe verified. That's basically a little cheat sheet of what it takes to be successful in retail. Like that's a little bit of it to get through that process. Okay.
100%.
Can you share, or do you recall like any a small brand that landed distribution through RangeMe or ECRM, like that you can remember, like, oh wow, that was a cool one.
Absolutely. They work with hundreds, probably thousands of suppliers on an annual basis. So it's a great feeling when almost every single week I have suppliers that are reaching out thanking me for distribution agreements and retailers that they've landed. And so it's too many to spotlight. Everyone asks me every day too, new brands that are thinking about ECRM, are there success stories? And I'm like, well, yeah, we've been doing this for 30 years. We conduct hundreds of thousands of meetings each year, right? And we really have one main content person, and that's Joe on LinkedIn. And so we have one person that's trying to capture as many success stories and testimonials as he can. So aside from that, it's like organic testimonials and stuff that are out there. And so two come to immediate mind. One, a shout out to Bones Coffee, phenomenal products. They have roasted line, and they also have ready to drink products too. But he's been the guy that represents that brand, has been coming to ECRM for quite some time, and not just one, right? Like he's frequenting the category sessions that make sense. And just, I think it was last week, posted that he landed Walgreens nationally. I mean, that's huge. And I just commented, congrats. And he replied back and said, hey, I'm sorry I didn't give ECRM credit. And he tagged ECRM and said, that stemmed from me meeting with the buyer at this particular session. So, I mean, that's huge, and obviously it's like we can only take so much credit, right? Like he executed that meeting. He had the right product mix. It was the right timing. He obviously did the follow up and the due diligence. But what we do is make the connections, right? It's about efficiency. And so that's one win right there. Another one that comes to mind too, just I've been working with him for so long, his name's Isan. He's the founder of Island Boy Spices. And so he attended his first ECRM session with us last February in Jacksonville and had a great experience. Loved the format, took full advantage of networking it up when he wasn't in the meetings, and really just a great personality, positive and outgoing, and really utilizing every opportunity that he had there on site, even outside of the meetings. So he attended again, since many of the category sessions are biannual, he attended again in the summer last year. And the way he tells the story is he met with Kahi, was one of the buyers he met with, and had a good meeting the first time around, right? The first initial meeting in February. Said, followed up multiple times, because the buyer was interested, didn't hear back. Saw that buyer again in July. And as soon as the buyer came in the room, she said, so sorry, you don't need to go through the pitch again. Let's just talk next steps, right? So it wasn't for a lack of interest. It was just, buyers get so busy, and again, timing and everything, obviously is a big factor. So that led to he's getting ready to roll out with Kahi. So that was a huge win. And I love that story because it talks a lot about the patience and the persistence sometimes that are key elements in being a supplier or brand owner, because it doesn't happen overnight,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I don't think there's a brand out there that can say my business blew up overnight and I landed all these national accounts. It's a process. It takes time. It takes trust and relationships. And so that, I think is a big win in itself, because, that element of having a national distributor is key when it comes to getting into some of those bigger retailers.
Interesting that you bring that out because, like, when you say like it doesn't happen overnight, like I just think of something that does that is like something that goes viral. And today's day and age, like people want that. They want to go viral. They want to have it real fast. And I'm like just thinking like I can't ever recall a brand just having that same kind of like impact going viral. And even if it did, I don't know if it would be good because then it might happen so fast that I've seen those who've gotten viral and then immediately just decline because it was just too much too fast.
I think that's a awesome, awesome point. I mean, that resonates because I think just that, like you said, in the society that we live in today and everything's at your fingertips and you want it right now, that immediate gratification, that's not retail, right? Like it's just You think about from the retail perspective where there's specific category review timelines, where buyers make decisions. If you're not constantly nurturing those accounts and putting yourself out there and building relationships, and a lot of it's timing, you're not going to have success, or it can feel disappointing because maybe it doesn't happen as quick as you want it to. Because I have accounts I've worked with over the years that it took them 5 years to land a key account, like Sam's Club, for example, right? But to your point, like it's probably good that that didn't happen immediately because they might not have been ready to take on a behemoth like that.
No, that's good stuff. I just saw Bones, so that one is really recent because I just even saw it on LinkedIn, like them announcing that partnership. The Island Boys one, I've definitely seen that brand somewhere, and I thought it stood out to me. But that one's a great story, like you said, because people get busy, and maybe once they didn't get that response when everything went ghost from the distributor or the customer they were going after, they might have felt discouraged. But that just goes to show that, hey, like you said, everyone's busy. Like buyers are busy, especially. And if you don't get a response, yes, it might mean that they're not interested. But there's also a really big chance that they didn't see it, they forgot. So, yeah, you still have another chance. Like,
Or like your story mentions, like they did see it. You just needed that patience part of just going like, okay, the door will open. You just gotta wait for that door to open.
100%
But following
patience.
up on that, like, can you think of an example where someone made a mistake because they weren't that patient? Because I feel like one mistake that like some buyers might do or some suppliers might do is just, I guess mostly suppliers, is they try to think of the next thing. They're like, oh, okay, this thing didn't work out. So it's like, oh, let me jump on the next thing. Where it's like, no, stay on your current thing and just give it some time.
Yeah. I mean, have I seen
Yeah, and you don't have to mention who, obviously, because we don't want to kind of like badmouth anyone. But it's just kind of like maybe it's like we learn from our mistakes, right? So any of that we could get would be great.
Yeah, I've unfortunately seen a lot over the years. So I could answer that in a number of ways. I guess I'll answer it in a way that maybe isn't too painful, but I think will again lend itself well to anyone listening that might be thinking about ECRM or maybe is attending and maybe not utilizing it like they should. I think is the key is preparation, right? A mistake some suppliers make even to this day, I see. It's unfortunate because we put the tools out there, but treating it like a trade show, right? So they show up and a buyer sits down at their table and the supplier says, "Tell me about yourself. What do you do? How many stores do you have? Which distributors do you work with?" And that in itself is a mistake, right? Because at a trade show, you expect that, right? You have to have those qualifier conversations because you never are quite sure who's going to stop by and when. But if you're if you have HEB on your schedule at 9 a.m. on Monday morning and that buyer sits down at your table, you better have a good idea of how many stores do they have, right? Which regions are they in? Which distributors do they use? Have a basic idea of that business and being able to talk intelligently about how your products are going to fit on the shelf, how you're going to fit in their distribution network and so on, and solve that problem or complement that category. And I think that's key, right? The beauty of ECRM is you can come in prepared just like you would for an office appointment. You can do your due diligence. You can start planning now for your meetings in July or October or whenever that is. So not treating it like, and also not treating it like the buyer's already interested, right? Because sometimes I see that mistake where it's like, you know, someone has, let's say, a supplier's 30 meetings, and by the end they're scratching their head going, "I thought all these buyers were interested in my products." And it's like, well, you create that interest during your meetings, right? Like the initial match was there because that buyer's responsible for your category. You meet any requirements or high level requirements or qualifiers essentially to do business. But the real interest you garner during the meetings themselves, right? So not assuming the buyer knows everything about your product, not assuming that interest level is already there. So really just doing your due diligence, taking ownership, I think are some key things that suppliers can do to have a better outcome.
that's a good one because your time there is limited. So you should understand, like you said, like you shouldn't be spending part of sorry, correct me. The meetings range from 10 to 15 minutes or
10 and 20.
Okay, 10 and 20. If you have a 10-minute meeting and you're asking, just because you said HEB, we'll use them, and you're asking that buyer, oh, how many stores? Can you tell me about your company? Da 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 da. Yeah, you already killed valuable time. And by the end
Yeah.
of your meeting, the meeting's over and you just figured that out and they're already on to the next. And
Right.
yeah, you got to know. Yeah, like you said, it gives you time to prep for them so you can understand you might have the greatest product ever, but how are you going to solve their problem, fit into their ecosystem, and make it happen for them? So that's great that you shared that. Let's talk about LinkedIn a little bit, just because you guys are pretty active. And okay, so now it makes sense. You mentioned Joe is like the marketing kind of guy, and I see him a lot. And he had just pointed out too. He's like, "Oh, who's this guy?" I see him on, and I'm like, "Dude, he's always on there."
His face is plastered everywhere, right?
Yeah,
Anything with ECR.
it's amazing. Hey, you're not too shabby either. So what keeps you posting and engaging there?
Yeah, I could probably even do more of it, quite frankly. But LinkedIn, in my opinion, is probably one of the most underutilized resources that's out there that is free, right? But even to this day, I find suppliers that aren't on RangeMe. Actually, just this morning, I had a supplier email me that was asking again about success stories, and I said, "Are you on LinkedIn?" I mean, literally, because if you're on LinkedIn, you would see it. Because I mean, there's just a lot of, like I said, organic posting and things that we post as well, where you can see it. But yeah, I like to utilize LinkedIn in a number of ways. I mean, just creating my own personal brand profile, if you will. I love supporting brands that I work with, being able to, follow retailers and just various industry professionals and peers. And there's just so much that I learn every time I'm just scrolling through a feed, right? Like the Bones Coffee example, or seeing something relevant, category information or trends, mergers and acquisitions. I mean, there's so much that you can pick up just by scrolling through a feed for 10 minutes. And also, again, building your relationships, because over the years I've heard multiple times, I attend, an industry trade show, and I go up to supplier's booth because they've probably gotten 100 emails from me, probably more, and they'll go, "Tyler, you're a real person? Like, I've gotten so many emails from you, they'll think I'm a robot." And it's like, no, I'm a real human. So I think just that human element, being able to connect with people on a more personal basis too, because we all have lives out of what we do for our day today. But the retail, I mean, food and beverage is a fun space. So I love being able to, sample brands that, new and emerging brands. Of course, I get a lot of people that say, "Hey, can I send you this product sample?" And love being able to share that with the kids too. They go crazy. We'll get a box of snacks or something, and the kids will dive in, and being able to support brands again that I work with that I'll see on the shelf, snap a quick picture of a brand I see at Publix that I'm working with or something. So it's just a lot of fun. It doesn't require a ton of time either, right? I'm sure both of you can attest to that. I mean, to
Yeah.
do a quick post, you don't need to put a bunch of time into it. It can be, Joe loves the selfies and the selfie videos and stuff. And, I might throw one of those out there every now and then again, but just to post something, what I feel is relevant or is going to connect with my audience.
Yeah, that's good. And like you mentioned, some of the posts, it doesn't take that long. And for me, I think those are the ones that are the most authentic, where like it's just off the cuff. You just send a quick video or a quick picture that's very real. It's not doctored up or prepared or whatnot. And that can build the connection for everyone. Like, yes, I've been to ECRM as a retailer, and my company right now goes participates in ECRMs. I've never met Tyler. I haven't met him at an ECRM event. I didn't go to the last one. Some of my colleagues went, but him and I, this interview came from LinkedIn. Like I've seen him active there. I've engaged with his content, and he's engaged with mine. And that's where this came from. Like I sent him a message, but he probably replied because he knows I'm a real person. So he's like, okay, I've seen this. I've seen multiple things. You guys are actually trying to do something. I would love to be a part of that, which we totally appreciate. It goes both ways, but yeah, this interview came from LinkedIn. So just to share.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, and I mean, like you said, it's just that another human element, right? Where it's like we both share network, right? Our companies are doing business, so appreciate that opportunity because I'm sure you do too. But I get a lot of spam stuff, right? That fills my inbox on LinkedIn. Everybody's trying to sell you something. Usually it's a technology platform or an HR this or a accounting thing. And, I don't even look at half this stuff, but when you get those legitimate messages like, oh, okay, cool. Like, yeah, I'd love to be a part of this podcast. So, appreciate what you're doing. I'm glad you set this up.
From your vantage point, this is going to tie back into like those pitfalls, but we'll put it in a positive way, and it ties to LinkedIn. How do you think they can leverage LinkedIn to get on a buyer's radar without feeling spammy? Or maybe if you want to say it a different way, is there something that you've seen that you're like, oh, they did this and I think that was great, or I know it ended up resulting in something positive? So either one.
Yeah, definitely. I think just, you might have already said this, but just being authentic, right? I mean, putting your brand out there, putting your face out there, telling your story, who you are as a person, what you believe in, that can certainly be beneficial. And, of course, putting the brand out there, right? And I think you need a good mix of that because nobody wants to be sold all the time, right? Like, of course, I'll post stuff about ECRM, but it's not every single day, right? That's why I like to mix up the personal content because if you're just constantly selling something, I don't think people are going to want to engage with that. If you put it in a fun light, like Nibrew, right? And don't just say this, I'm on the podcast, but honestly, one of the coolest products I've seen in so long. I mean, just the technology behind it, the taste. I mean, it's awesome. I truly love the brand, but I think that's one that, certainly could have a nice brand presence, right? Just the product itself, when you show what it does and how it works, I think that can be really cool. So I think there's a lot of great elements. One thing I've seen some brands do, and I have no affiliation with this brand whatsoever, but Midday Squares, I've seen do a tremendous amount of LinkedIn content that's been awesome, which I'm sure that's benefited them in a lot of ways. It's almost like, I can picture if I'm a buyer, I'd probably want to work with them because I see all the stuff they're doing in their viral content that they're putting out and really the behind the scenes and how they approach the business. It's like, here, like, here's a lens into my business and see how we operate and stuff. So, there's some I think that do it really, really well and some that are trying to figure it out. But I think as long as you're posting, you don't have to put a lot of thought into it. Start. Just start to create that network because you can see a lot of organic growth. I see a lot of people posting about numbers pretty frequently. I just had landed 5,000 followers or 10,000 connections. And I mean, quite frankly, unless you have the right audience, it doesn't matter, right? You can have 100,000 connections, but unless you have people that get what you're doing and are engaging with your content, it really doesn't matter. So I think that's just where, again, being authentic truly matters.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good point.
It almost just sounds like kind of like, LinkedIn's a good mix of just being professional and then just being like outgoing as well too. Like I could go on Instagram and promote my business, but it's more kind of like a socializing app where it's just like you're there just to share all the good moments and stuff like that. Not to say that LinkedIn you don't share the good moments, but it's like you're also there to be like a little bit professional as well too.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I try to stay just my personal thing, and I try to stay away from politics, right? I mean, that has a place, but in my opinion, it's not LinkedIn, and I don't fault other people for doing it. People can do whatever they want, but me personally, I don't put a lot of that stuff out there. Just, again, a personal opinion that can be pretty polarizing topics and stuff, but I try to keep it professional and keep it relevant. That's it.
Three of the brands that you mentioned, Bones Coffee, Island Boy Spices, and Midday Squares, which I've only seen on LinkedIn. Well, actually, all three of them. I haven't seen either of them in retail, like while I've been out. But the fact that I've seen them on LinkedIn, if I ever do come across either of those products, I'm probably going to be much more inclined to make that purchase. That's like I've never seen either of them, but when I do, I'm probably going to be inclined to make that purchase because they all have stood out for some reason. So yeah, it's just some of the
Exactly.
marketing, like you said, just getting in front of the right people. All right, let's shift it into a different topic.
To current times.
Yeah. Like market headwinds, tariff talk. So there's tariffs on everything from canned goods to packaging right now. Is there any ripple effects that you're hearing in buyer conversations right now or like anything like that?
I definitely think there's impacts. Quite frankly, it might be too early to tell, what the long-term impacts are going to be, but we've certainly heard chatter and have seen some retailers saying, they're not going to accept price increases. If you want to, you can submit for request for a price increase or adjustment. That process can take a few months, but I think that's a pretty immediate thing. I think there's suppliers out there that are definitely feeling the pain, right? Because if you're getting hit with tariffs, you certainly weren't planning on that, and now that's eating into your margins, and may not even be sustainable, right? So I think that's certainly something on a lot of people's minds. And obviously, every supplier is different, right? If you're sourcing, ingredients and packaging, here within the States, I think you're certainly at a competitive advantage right now versus someone that's, importing in containers or sourcing from outside the US, because you might be impacted by some of those tariffs. And, I feel like everything's changing on a day-to-day basis. When we were at that last session in Chicago, in April, it was interesting timing because that was right after or prior to that, the tariff announcement was made for Canada, and we did see some immediate impact with our business with various Canadian retail partners that work with ECRM distributors backing out of various sessions because of the tariff situation, all the unknowns. And unfortunately, some Canadian suppliers too. We have a really good presence with and relationships with various Canadian suppliers. So we did see some ripple effects within our business, but not everybody was canceling, right? We saw some suppliers that saw opportunities still, and again, unknowns, and retailers like Loblaw and others continuing to support ECRM, because I think it's not forever, right? I mean, the retail dynamic and the economy changes, I feel like, on a day-to-day basis. But the interesting thing about that timing was because they're at the session, there, it got announced that the tariffs were going to be paused for another 90 days. So I think those that were there were happy they came, because that served into just, there are opportunities here, and, the tariffs might not be here for the long haul, but who knows? I'm not an economics professor, but I definitely see that, I think
Sounds like
whether
that.
you're a retailer or a supplier, you
Yeah.
might be pivoting right now. You're looking at alternative strategies. I was talking to one supplier from Canada there and asked some of those questions. How are tariffs impacting your business? And they were saying if the tariffs do stick, right, for a long period of time, years, they're planning on building a facility in the US. So I think everyone is trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and it's like how you mentioned before, like, in the retail space, the biggest thing you got to have is like patience. Once when you just let the process do its thing, and, there's going to be the opportunities that pop up.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
I was going to ask how the tariff dynamics change how retailers think, but you kind of mentioned, I was going to also ask, or do you think it's still shaking out? So you mentioned it could be a little premature right now, but what some of them have put into place is kind of like, we're not accepting any cost increases right now. And yeah, if you want to go through that process, go ahead. They kind of bought some time right there for themselves. Yeah, it might be difficult on the supplier. Like you said, if they don't have the margin to sustain, that can wipe them out right there. But if they go through the process, who knows? By the end of the process, things might be a total situation and everything might be okay. So I can see that from both sides. It can be very tough for a supplier, and it seems very easy for a retailer to say, I'm not going to accept the cost increase. But then on the flip side, some of these retailers are really large corporations saying that. So they might also think, okay, we're not going to immediately, they themselves might not be like, oh, there's a tariff, let's immediately raise the price for our consumers. Let's hold on. Let's see what we can kind of sustain in the moment, and then kind of create a go forward plan. So, okay, that kind of answers that one. This one, I don't know if there's anything there, but for brands feeling squeezed by cost inflation and trade policies, are there any negotiating angles or data points that you think might resonate with the buyer?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Honestly, I don't know. I think in general, just the selling point of it always has to make sense for the retailer, right? And they're not going to replace something on the shelf unless they feel confident that this is something that's going to resonate with their consumers and it's going to have adequate sell through. So I don't think that changes with the situation with the tariffs. And again, I think that's why it a lot of it's let's wait and see, right? Because the dynamic tends to be changing on a daily, weekly basis. All you got to do is look at the news, and kind of makes you go crazy because it's really hard to get a grasp on what's going on and what the economy is going to look like a month from now. So I definitely think just that patience again is a factor. Sometimes it's staying the course, other times it's pivoting, and sometimes it's not always clear.
Okay.
I I think that's a great answer right there, actually. So it wasn't something specific, but yeah, like you said, there's no silver bullet for this right now. Every single brand and retailer is different. I'm literally sitting here with Dubai chocolate that I actually saw on
Nice.
LinkedIn. A 7-Eleven franchisee posted. I sent him a message, Zelled him, and then he sent me the product. I just got it. I'm looking at Supreme Beef Jerky. So they're both going to have their own situations when it comes to retail. This might not get a cost increase based off the current situation, but this might, it's a kind of a trendy item right now. So they might not want to miss, and this might get the acceptance or vice versa. I don't know, but yeah, that's a great answer. We're almost close to wrapping it up, but I'm thinking, looking ahead, let's say 3 years out, how do you expect platforms like ECRM, RangeMe, and social media or LinkedIn to reshape that buyer relationship?
Just, I think I can answer in the perspective of maybe just the industry and how we fit in. I don't think that, you know, ECRM is going anywhere, right? It RangeMe and LinkedIn, I think they're all platforms that will continue to grow. I often think about it's hard not to think about the impact that AI has or will have, right, in our lives, because that's we could probably spend a lot of time chatting about that, but it's probably that could probably be a whole other podcast episode, right? AI. But I often think, again, where do we fit in, right? Is that something, do I ever have to worry about my job because of AI? And I don't think so, right? AI is never going to replace a human element, right? An actual conversation and understanding, empathy, right? Understanding what a supplier, what a buyer, what they're looking for, what their objectives are. What we do, yes, again, there's technology, but the human element and I don't think that's going away, right? The purchasing decisions, I mean, it's driven by humans in conversations. And I think during the pandemic years, when we pivoted to virtual worked great. It served the purpose. We were still able to make buyer and seller connections happen when nobody was taking corporate office appointments, when trade shows were all shut down. Our business was growing. I mean, we were kind of the only game in town. And it worked so well that we could have stayed the course and kept the virtual meetings. Surprisingly, I think the value of virtual started to come in question the more and more trade shows came back, right? Not does it work, but I kept hearing it, especially from food and beverage suppliers. We want to be in person. We want to have buyers sample. They have to taste the product. That was the key driver of coming back in person, right? So you can sample products, but also the other key element and the point I want to make, it was the networking. I have so many people that reach out to me and said, I remember you guys did that boat cruise in San Diego years back, that networking event. We got more business done on that than we did during our meetings, or being able to see my buyer in the hallway, right, in between meetings, or the cocktail hour, the meals, and so on. So those were elements that we could never duplicate virtually, right? So those human element things, those aren't going away. Yeah, I think naturally we strive for that connection. We want to get in front of people as often as we can in this business. I think it's crucial. So with that, again, the next 3 years, I think we'll continue to take market share from trade shows, as suppliers are looking for better ways to spend their money and get brand exposure, because I know we can do it better than anyone else. So I just think sky's the limit for platforms like ECRM, RangeMe, and LinkedIn is just a valuable resource that, again, I don't think is going anywhere either.
One thing, right after I asked, like the first, like something just kept hitting in my head, like the words human element, even before you said it. So then when you continue to mention exactly that, and I was like, all right, perfect. So I'm on the right track too. But yeah, I guess it's that human, like AI, the human element, like it's not going to replace that. And then
Yeah.
humans have to, we're not even talking about AI, like you said, it's a whole different thing, but humans have to be able to use it too. So get familiar with it, take advantage of it, learn how to use it. So then somebody has to be behind it, driving it. But okay, now what's one life or career lesson you've learned from connecting thousands of brands and buyers that you think every founder or buyer should hear?
I think there's two elements that I could point out. The first one that comes to mind, and this word has come up a few times here in this session, is patience, right? I think that's necessary, especially in this day and age, and especially from a supplier point of view, because you want it right away. You have that meeting, you want the business, but on average, I always set the expectation at ECRM from the first time you meet with a buyer, it could be 6 months to a year, before you hit the shelf, right? It could be longer. So I think patience is definitely key. It's easy to start pointing fingers and saying, ECRM doesn't work because I didn't land that big account after my first session, or nobody wants my product, right? That's could, you know, probably further from the truth. It's just, it takes time to nurture those relationships, to build the business where you get it in a place where, there is going to be that follow through in distribution shelf space. So I think patience is key. Another big one is transparency. And I think that comes on both sides. I've heard this from buyers. We had a leadership summit, we called it, at the private label session back in April in Chicago. And I think it was one of the leaders from Sprouts talked a lot about transparency and what they look for within suppliers. And it goes on both sides, right? Because, you know, if you're a retailer, you have clear things that you're looking for. If you're a supplier, I think you need to have the same, right? Because, you don't come into a meeting and just tell someone they want what they want to hear. Being transparent about your production capabilities, what it is that you're going to be able to deliver, because if you don't have that on both sides, you're not going to have a good partnership. And I think that is true in a lot of things, right? Even outside of business, transparency and patience are both key elements.
No, that's awesome. There was so much value and knowledge shared in like the last hour. This is only our second episode, but
Yeah.
I know 100 episodes down the road, I'm still going to be like, everybody has to watch that second episode. Like, you guys need to know. If you're not on ECRM, RangeMe, social media, all that stuff, like this was such a good episode. So
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and stuff like that. I mean, um, even just somebody coming from the outside, I'm just going like, wow, there's just so much that I just didn't know about this, and it's a great tool. If anybody ever tells me that they're a buyer, I'll be like, look, ECRM and RangeMe, go check it out.
What's
Appreciate
funny
it,
is
guys.
I've already, just from being here, I was like, hey, is Nairu RangeMe verified? And I got the response that um, 3 of our 4 brands that we have on there are, but Nairu isn't. So when I go downstairs
Uh,
right now, we're gonna have that conversation. Um,
okay.
I'm like, are you really? It's 7x more exposure, but that just helped us. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine. And we're already experienced in selling to 40,000 retail doors. So I can't imagine somebody who's not. But tell us what's next. Like, what's the next event you have coming up, or where you're gonna be, or what's going on?
Yeah, the next big one I'm gearing up for is Weekend Dallas that we have in July. So it's our center store grocery week. We have several categories there, from beverage to snack to baking to condiment sauces, spreads to can dry and box foods. We have a more unique one at that time. We call it the Global Cuisines Food and Beverage Session, which is heavy on items that would fit within that international aisle at a grocery store, for example, like Hispanic food, Asian foods, Indian foods. So looking forward to that. And we have also a new one on the calendar that same week for food service. So it's food service, ethnic and global cuisines and flavors. So we're excited about that one. It's something we've been hearing from a lot of food service buyers, that they're looking for more global flavors and ethnic cuisine. So, first year on the calendar for that one, and forgot about coffee, tea, and cocoa. So, coffee will be another big one there. So, it's been a lot of years since we've had anything in Texas, for that matter, and I haven't been to Dallas in quite some time. So, looking forward to that. Hopefully, experiencing some of the local cuisine while I'm there.
All right.
Yeah.
I just went to a restaurant. Oh my God, I totally forgot the name. I'll have to tell you on LinkedIn. It's like a barbecue spot that I was just there like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I'll have to
in
share it
Dallas.
with you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm totally blanking on the name. Anyhow, it's pretty popular. I forgot
Yeah,
who.
shoot it over to me when you think about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, dude, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be talking and connecting soon. we'll have this up in a few days. We'll send it to you. And
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, guys, really appreciate the opportunity and pleasure. Let me know, what I can do to continue to support you guys, and excited about our partnership with the NIBREW.
Yeah, looking forward to that too. I mean, I'm one of the members that's like closely involved in it as well too, and we're trying to put out, like you said, a lot of content on there to put up on LinkedIn, all of our socials and stuff like that. So you'll definitely see more from us.
all
Cool.
right. So
Looking
thank
forward
you,
to
me
it.
and Tyler, making it
My
in
pleasure.
retail episode 2. Subscribe, comment, let us know who you want to see, what you want to see. And like I said, on the 100th episode, I will call back. This is going to be in one of the top episodes.
Yep.
So, all right.
Hopefully another revisit in the future.
Anytime. Look forward to it. Have me back at maybe 100th episode, and we can revisit.
All right.
All right,
All
sounds
right.
good.
Have a good day,
All
man.
right,
Thanks.
guys. Thanks so much.